Greetings, founders. Welcome to Feel the Boot. Today, I want to talk about the issues of pitching online and how things have changed now that most of the pitching activity and fundraising has moved to an online context over Zoom or whatever platform right now because of COVID, but I expect that's going to be something that's going to continue in the long run. It actually seems to be working pretty well. Now, all of this came out of a question asked by Munly Leong, and I hope I'm saying his name right, who posted a comment on a previous video asking about how he could identify investors who would be willing and able and do investments 100% online remotely. I think his concern was that there's a lot of investment theater going on, and many investors maybe were doing pitch fests but not actually writing checks in these remote environments. So I want to drill down and very specifically answer his question, as well as more broadly look at the ways in which pitching online over Zoom is different and the same as doing it in person, and give you some very specific advice on how to maximize the effectiveness of your online pitching. Hi, I'm Lance Cottrell, and I'm here because I want to help founders like you along their journey. I know what a difficult path this is that you've chosen to walk, because I've been there. I was a founder and made all the mistakes that are out there. I've been an executive, I've been an angel investor, and now I spend most of my time advising startups, helping them find money, find strategy, and find success. Now, being an entrepreneur, being an early stage founder, especially the first time, is like a vertical learning curve. There's so many things you need to know and do and learn, things that you've probably never done before. It just is insane that anyone tries to take on a task like this. So kudos for doing that. What I'm trying to do is give you a lot of that information so you can avoid the obvious mistakes, the mistakes I've made, the mistakes I've seen. I want to provide the insight that you need to be successful. And I don't want to provide recipes. I think that's often a problem. What I want to give you is understanding so that you're able to see why you need to do the things you need to do and apply that whatever kind of surprises you may encounter. Now, Munly asked specifically about finding investors who will, can, and do these kinds of deals in an entirely virtual context. So it breaks into two different parts. First, are they working with founders remotely? And second, are they actually doing deals? So finding angels and investors, startup funds, is not that difficult. There's a lot of resources. Things like the Angel Capital Association has a list of all of the major angel groups, at least in North America. There's many other resources around the world. A little bit of Googling will quickly find you a list of those sites. And they will almost always tell you how to apply and how their process works. And in most cases, they're currently doing things online because they're not allowed to meet in person. Certainly, we at the North Bay Angels have been doing all of our meetings on Zoom since the lockdown first started, and we're not alone. I'll put a link to some resources down in the description. Now, the second question is, are they making investments? So in many cases, you can just look to see if they are. You can go to AngelList or other resources, Signal, and see who's listing the deals that they've done recently. And you can see, yeah, this person, this group has got a bunch of investments. They're clearly active right now. Or you can see that, no, they really haven't done anything in a while. So avoid the ones who are going silent during COVID or for any reason, right? They're clearly not actively involved in investing in startups. Now, in some cases, angels and groups aren't reporting that information out, in which case you may just want to reach out and ask them. I think it's very reasonable to send a request to these groups to say, hey, you look like you're a good fit, and ideally you should have researched these people to make sure that they are good fits for you. You say, hey, are you doing investments right now? How many investments do you do per year? What kind of fraction of applicants or people who make it through your screening process get investments? So that'll give you some idea of whether or not this is worth pursuing for you, because you don't want to waste your time. Fundraising is already a hugely time-consuming thing anyway. But the reality is that the vast majority of groups that I'm aware of, individuals, angel groups, microfunds, are still investing at just about the same level they were before any of this changed. And there may be a little bit more money going to larger deals, somewhat lower risk, but in general, there's a very active flow. So it should be possible to get that kind of investment if you go out looking for it. However, it turns out there is a bit of a wrinkle in this because Munly isn't in the United States. He is in Thailand, and that complicates things because if he's looking at least American angel investors, many of us don't invest outside of the United States because it can be a big question mark. Lots of angels know the US rules very well. They understand what the companies are like, what the valuation should be. They know what to look for. When you start getting farther and farther afield, this becomes more and more uncomfortable. And so when you're looking at who you might want to pitch to, one of the first good screens is, are they in fact investing in your part of the world? Now, you can make this easier on the investor. For example, you can register as a Delaware C Corp. That is the gold standard of corporate structures out there. Everyone knows Delaware C Corps, therefore legally you are a US company. Even if your operations center is abroad, just that fact may make many investors more comfortable in investing in you. However, in addition to that, there are now a lot of funds and syndicates and angel groups that specialize in international markets. They realize that overseas, from the US perspective, company valuations tend to be much lower, and so these deals can be very attractive. Often the markets in the US are highly saturated with tons of competition, but if you go to Latin America, South Asia, Africa, maybe they're total green fields there, and these are huge markets. And so there have popped up investment groups that specialize in that. So spend some time looking for groups that are active in investing in your part of the world, because they're going to be the ones who are most interested. If you just go at random and pick any angel off the lists, the odds are they're probably not going to invest in any of the less common places for North American angels to invest. Also, it may be worth looking into angels that are local to you. There are investment ecosystems in most large cities anywhere in the world, and they're all unique. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of advice about finding and pitching angel investors in Thailand, because it's interestingly just how much cultural specificity there is to angel groups. Even within the United States, the East Coast and the West Coast behave very differently. As a rule, for example, the East Coasters tend to be much more interested in the financials and revenue and projections, whereas on the West Coast, in the Silicon Valley investment community, they're all looking for the next giant unicorn. They really don't care about the practicalities of what you're doing, as long as there's some really gigantic market with network effects that you have the chance to totally conquer. And they figure if you absolutely conquer this enormous opportunity, you'll work out how to make money at it at the end of the day. And so I don't really care what your financials look like, right? And that's just in the United States. I know internationally there's a lot more variation. What people expect for valuations changes a lot within the US, even more abroad. So look into what that community is. They're certainly going to be more comfortable investing locally in their own ecosystem where they can meet you in person eventually and talk to you, and they understand the business climate where you are. But sometimes they're not as robust or as open to investing in early stage tech companies as the angel investment systems are in North America, because it's been going on here for longer. So with that specific answer out of the way, let's look more generally at what this move to virtual pitching means for you, the advantages, disadvantages, and things you need to pay attention to. And really, in general, less has changed than you might think. The process is really pretty similar, and most of the usual advice still applies. I think the best thing about this move to virtual pitching is it opens up your geographic reach so much. Now, instead of having to drive to the pitch event or fly there, but really the odds of getting funded aren't that high, so you don't usually want to fly to a pitch where you're probably not going to get any money. Now, you just sit at home and open up your computer and pitch as many people as you want, right? You can pitch anyone anywhere in the world as long as they're willing to talk to you. So that opens up the horizon of possible investors enormously. And I think that's a big win and something that's likely to continue. At the North Bay Angels, we're looking very seriously at continuing to have virtual sessions in addition to in-person sessions. We're kind of thinking maybe we'll do in-person for local companies and then alternate that with virtual sessions for more distant companies so that we still get access to that deal flow. Because we like this too, we get to see companies that we wouldn't have otherwise. So to me, the biggest disadvantage of this virtual pitching is the lack of personal connection. You're not getting to meet with the investors one-on-one. You can't let your amazing personality and energy shine through in the same way. You can't go have a beer afterwards and develop personal links. It's only limited to that little box that you're communicating through. And that makes it more difficult and puts a lot more emphasis on the pitch itself. Now, it's always been the case that a lot of the screening happens before you get to pitch. You're probably going to be submitting some sort of a one-pager or a pitch deck for them to read ahead and decide, is this someone that we want to invite to our meeting? But you don't have the same chance to go to in-person pitch events and maybe meet someone and talk to them between sessions, build that relationship so you've got that warm invite coming in, which means that the materials you send ahead have to carry more weight. Generally, you're going to be sending these to someone that you have never met in person, and they may want to read it before they're even willing to take a 15-minute call with you. That's certainly the way I've been operating. I get so many of these pitches or requests to talk that I just can't handle them all, except for, of course, the office hours for you people who join Feel the Boot. So I'm looking to screen. I want them to send me a deck that I can look at and then decide, is this something that I can afford to spend some time to talk to this person, to send them on to the group or make an investment decision or whatever. So really nailing that initial pitch deck, designed to be read on its own. And I'll put a link in the description and a card up there to a whole episode I did early on talking about why you need to have two different pitch decks. But it's got to be one that stands on its own and ideally not a teaser. I see these people are going, I'm just going to give you a hint of what I'm doing, and hopefully that'll stimulate your appetite and make you interested and make you want to follow up. But if the deck really has huge holes in it, I have no real sense of what you're doing, just some sort of slightly grandiose claims that you're hoping will excite me, I'll generally just move on. There's a lot of people who are actually telling me what they're doing and telling me exciting things, and so they're the ones I'm going to follow up with. So make sure that you really do lay out the core of your business in that material to make sure that you can get to at least that first Zoom meeting. So I was saying the pitch is really more important than ever because you don't get to have those extra interactions before the meeting, after the meeting, and other events to establish rapport with people. So that pitch has got to carry all the weight. So make sure that that is really, really tight, crisp, practiced. I'll put a couple of links. I've done a bunch of other episodes specifically on building pitch decks and delivering pitches, and that matters more than ever over Zoom. I've always been a big fan of using narrative in your pitch. If you can put things into context of a story, it helps me understand it. And that really applies at any point, but I think it matters even more with Zoom because it's hard to hold attention, right? Computers are such a distraction-rich environment. People are sitting there, there's emails, there's alerts going off on their desk, all sorts of things, and you need to keep their attention on you and help them follow the thread. And random facts are more difficult to pay attention to and harder for our brains to entrain with. If you can tell stories, our brains are wired to listen to stories. And I think that's going to be a much more effective way to keep your audience's attention on what you're saying through the Zoom environment. So another way of holding the audience's attention, keeping that investor focused on you, is to not just make your presentation one long slide deck where you're just talking and talking and talking. Ideally, you want to have this be a more interactive experience. So you're alternating between presenting from a slide deck to having a conversation about things, answering questions, inviting questions from your audience, and also doing live demos to the extent that you're ready and comfortable doing those, or maybe interspersing short videos or something that shows what you're up to. But be ready to bounce back and forth and make sure you've practiced it so it's not this kind of cumbersome thing as you switch between modes, but you're able to very smoothly hop from this slide to some other slide to maybe some backup materials to the demo to back to the conversation, and you really have mastery of the points you want to hit. So no matter what order you're forced to do things in, you can cover all the material that you know you want to deliver, right? Because it's important to have your own agenda of what's the information that I need to get across to show my company in the best possible light. And to support this, I also recommend creating quite a lot of backup slides, things that you don't want in your core deck, but if it's asked, you can immediately snap to it and address that issue and then get back on point without having to be sort of vague, and for really important things, not having to say, I'll just get back to you. Although that's always legitimate, right? You can always say, that's a great question. I don't think we have time to dig into that at the level it needs. I'll get back to you. I'll send you an email with the answer to your question, and I'd love to drill down on that in our next meeting. So before I move on to cover my last few points, I want to ask you for a favor. If you've watched this far in the video, I assume you're getting some value out of it. And if so, I'd really like to ask you to do me a favor. And it's really simple. Just like this episode. If you're listening to it as a podcast, like the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, like the YouTube episode. It makes a huge difference. It tells the algorithm that this is something that is useful to founders like you and will help me get out in front of more people. And after all, the whole reason I'm doing this is to help other founders. I'd really appreciate it. It helps a lot. Now, if you're someone who's watched a whole bunch of these episodes, maybe you could take the next step, subscribe, ring the bell, maybe even comment, let me know what you liked and what else you'd like to see me cover in these episodes, and maybe even share it on social media. Let other founders know about it. But I know that's a big ask. If you could just like, it would be a huge help. All right, with that out of the way, the next thing you need to pay attention to is upping your audiovisual game. If you look or sound bad, it really reflects badly on you and your company. If it's muddy audio or you've got dings going off in the background, it's really echoey. The one I see all the time is you look like you're in the witness protection program because you're sitting in front of a bright window. Right? Any of those things completely kind of destroy the experience of the pitch. And even though they don't actually say anything about the quality of your company, they pollute the investor's entire perception of you and the company. So make sure you get those things right. Find a good location with good lighting. Your face is well illuminated, you're not washed out. Make sure that it's not some embarrassing background. You can use virtual backgrounds, but generally I'm not a huge fan of them because as you move your head, you get that weird halo effect around it, and that never looks too great. So if you can find just a simple, a white background, a uncluttered environment, that's going to be perfect for you. Bookshelves are also good. They're kind of nice and neutral and look good without being distracting to the audience. And I think avoiding distraction is important. I realize I'm not really practicing what I preach here. I've got kind of a lot of stuff behind me, but I love this stuff. It's part of my personality and I feel I need to share it with you. So you're just going to have to live with my kind of busy and geeky backdrop. Along with video, probably more important than video is sound. Make sure you've got good audio for your meeting. It's critical that your audience be able to hear you clearly. I'm amazed by how often people are super murky. They're talking away from their laptop or looking at something, or whatever microphone they're using is a long ways away, and it's hard to hear them. Right, there's enough challenge in Zoom. It is much harder to hear and follow people over video than it is in person. So do yourself a favor, get yourself a decent mic. I actually keep a big podcasting mic sitting right next to my monitor for when I'm doing Zoom events or things like that, so that the people I'm talking to can hear me clearly. It makes a big difference, and it only costs like $50. Of course, just because this is virtual doesn't mean you get to be totally casual about things. Take the meeting seriously. Don't come in some grungy t-shirt. Dress up a little bit. Show that you respect your audience and the time that they're giving you. Make sure that you're professional. You're there on time, if not early. Proper introductions. Make sure that this is clear that this is something that you are professional about. And as part of that, mute your alerts. Make sure that your computer has got all of the notifications turned off. Quit out of Slack, quit out of your chat apps, mute or turn off your phone, whatever you need to do. There's nothing more annoying than when someone's in the middle of a pitch hearing pings going off, or God forbid if you're sharing your screen, I'm actually seeing alerts or chats popping up on the screen. Sometimes not exactly what you wanted me to be seeing. Another thing about working on Zoom is that it's hard to gauge reactions. When you're in a room with someone and you're talking, you can immediately pick up on when they're confused, when they're bored, when they're distracted thinking about something or busy taking notes and you want to let them write those notes before you move on. In Zoom, it's much harder to tell what's going on. Maybe you can hear the keys clicking in the background, and hopefully that's them taking notes on what you're saying and not just them sending an email to someone because they've completely lost interest in what you're doing. But you want to be paying attention. So make sure that on your display, you're showing the audience, that their faces are showing up even when you're displaying, and increase the size of that window, make them big. You should know your slides. You don't need to be looking at them. You want to be looking at the audience while you're pitching, or at least alternating between making eye contact with the camera, because the camera is where the eye contact line is, right? If you're looking at their face, now it's clear that you're not actually looking at them. You're looking below them. Even though you are looking at them, it doesn't feel that way. So make sure when you're talking, you're delivering to the camera lens. But at the same time, be glancing away from time to time to look at their faces. Frequently check in to make sure that they are in fact engaged and paying attention. Even ask them, are you following this? Does that make sense? Do you buy that argument or that premise? Or do you think that that is a reasonable thing or a good strategy? Make sure that they're nodding along. Are you following this? Yeah, good, okay. And you can move on. That also involves slowing down. And I just did an episode on that, but I want to hit that again. Slow down in your pitches. Make sure that there's time for people to understand what you're saying and ingest it and then move on. I'll put a card, link in the description. So in summary, really, not all that much has changed. There's some specific practices that you need to alter for this kind of Zoom context. But in general, it's always been hard to raise funds. It's always going to be hard, particularly for first-time founders who don't have social connections to really deep pocket active investors. And if you're getting frustrated, if you're feeling like, wow, online pitching just doesn't work for me because you've done 10 pitches, really, you're just getting started. Now, if you've gone and done 100 pitches and you're still not getting investments, or at least expressions of really strong interest and then a no, then there's maybe something fundamentally wrong and you want to be going back and looking at the core ideas in your business, right? Is this a fundable business? Right? Do you have the potential to return the massive returns that investors need to see? Did an episode on that. Do you have all of your assumptions validated? Also did an episode on that. Right? There's all these things that you need to be running down to make sure that in fact your company is the kind of company that someone would invest in and that you're ready to take investment. You've risk reduced to the point where someone can say, yeah, if I hand you money, you can turn that into returns. Not, if I hand you this money, you're going to try a wild experiment and who knows, right? We want to know that you've done the wild experiments. You've kind of worked out all of the real big question marks, and it's in a tight package, and we believe the model that you're putting forward because you've done the work to make sure that it is effectively proven. Thanks for watching this episode of Feel the Boot. I hope you found it useful and interesting. Now, if you need your own boot personally, I encourage you to join Feel the Boot at feeltheboot.com. If you join the mailing list, I send out Calendly invitations to set up office hours with me on a regular basis. So you can get a one-on-one half-hour coaching session for free to talk about anything you want to help your startup. A lot of people talk to me about strategy, fundraising ideas. They want me to review their pitch or their pitch deck. I can talk about your go-to-market strategy, your marketing ideas, product market fit, how you're planning to grow the company, right? Any kind of topic you want, I'm here for you. I love talking to founders. It's just so much fun. Founders are a self-selected group of really amazing, interesting, motivated people who are trying to do something really hard. And those are just the most fun people in the world to talk to. Along those lines, I'd like to invite you to join a community that we're creating of other founders who also follow the Boot way, I guess you'd say, over at Facebook, the Feel the Boot Founders Alliance. I'll put a link down in the description. And until next time, hope to see you then. Ciao.